Joining me in studio is Onchari Oyeyo, who is a regional affairs commentator. Thank you very much for making time. Now, we have seen Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine's party saying that it will challenge President Yoweri Museveni's victory. And this comes as on Saturday, in a national address, Museveni praised the integrity of the vote, saying he thinks this may turn out to be the most cheating-free election since 1962. Was this a statement by President Museveni, a declaration that the other elections have not been fair?
Well, of course, yes, and he knows what he has been doing all along. And I think I tend to agree with him. When it comes to direct ballot stuffing, I think that was very limited. But then again, there are so many ways to, cheat in an election. When you don't allow your competitor to campaign freely while you're doing it, when you intimidate citizens into believing that if they vote in the other person, they're going to be in trouble, that is cheating in itself. So when it comes to direct ballot stuffing into ballot boxes, I think it was very, very limited. But of course, all the other malpractices were evident, they were widespread, and that is why I think whichever the outcome, it's tainted. Whichever direction it could like us to look at, it is tainted. So in as much as they can claim that it was cheating-free, it was, of course, not directly.
But then can opposition, leader Bobi Wine use this to his benefit?
Well, I don't think so because, again, Museveni is a strong man and he has not gotten the kind of pressure he needs to get from, especially, African countries so that he can impress democracy and even allow guys to, take account of what happened. Obviously, some observers were locked out, so the election was as opaque as you can imagine. And what I'd advise Bobi Wine to do is to, be grateful for what has happened, assemble his troops, because I think he had a very wonderful show when it comes to election of members of parliament, and mount a very serious opposition going forward so as to serve as an alternative government, because I don't think challenging the election is going to make any difference.
Many saw this election as a competition between the old and the young. Was it a level playing field from where you sit?
Of course it wasn't. From the word go, this guy was not allowed to even, campaign freely. He was harassed, he was beaten, his followers were beaten from, I think nearly every part of Uganda. His wife was harassed at various points, and all the way to, to the election itself, where communication was not free. You realize even the internet was shut down. So you cannot claim that it was, no one can claim that it was a level, playing field for Museveni and Bobi Wine. But then again, there is a tendency we have as young people of not voting. When it comes to campaigning, we can appear in rallies, we can make all the noise we usually do make, but then when it comes to casting ballots, we don't do that. So that accounts for the part of the difference we see between the votes which were garnered by Museveni and those which were garnered by Bobi Wine. Because most of us young people show up for campaign events, but then we don't vote. And that has been witnessed in so many African countries, even in Kenya itself, whereby, young people will show up, they participate in campaigns, in rallies, and make all sorts of noise. But when it comes to casting ballots, they don't do that.
I like that point that you've brought up. It's all about young people not voting. I don't think it's only young people. Let's just not forget that the turnout this time during the election was 57%. That is the lowest since Museveni took office. What does this say?
Well, just like in the United States and so many other places where elections have been held during this COVID time, we've witnessed what I'd call a suppression of turnout. And now in Uganda it becomes even worse because of the violence which was there. So most guys were even scared of getting out of their houses to go and vote. Now when you bring in the idea of COVID, it becomes a double, pressure point for voters. That contributed to the 57% we've witnessed, which of course turns out to be the lowest in Uganda for the longest time.
Let's talk about the lead up to the election. We saw brutality, we saw people dying. Even during the election time, we saw the internet that was shut down. It's only resumed a few hours ago. Yeah. Heavy military deployment at Bobi Wine's home and even in the country in general. Not forgetting the U.S. Embassy in Uganda declined to observe the election after authorities denied more than 75% of its accreditation requests. What does this say about democracy in that particular country, Uganda?
Now, that speaks volumes about democracy, not just in Uganda, but so many countries in Africa, whether it's Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, that is what we do. I think we're still backward in terms of implementation of democratic principles. We don't have even a sense of shame. And someone like Museveni, who's been in power for so long, should have been confident enough to allow observers to come in and watch what was happening. And I don't think, so much of the votes that are cast in elections come as a result of name recognition. And in as much as Bobi Wine has been able to become a sensation over a short period of time, the extent to which Museveni is entrenched, having been in power for more than 35 years, is so deep. So I don't think there was any need for him to engage in what he did, violence, denying observation requests from the American embassy and other observers and all that. He didn't have to do that. But then again, because of the backward nature of our democracies in most African countries, we have to engage in that. And
okay, so then you've said it says a lot not only about Uganda's democracy, but in Africa in general.
Yeah.
So then how do we move on as Africans?
What we have to do, I think, is to have support, especially from outside, which again is what we have to do, because you realize African countries actually rushed to congratulate Museveni instead of rebuking him for what he did in the run-up to the election and during the election itself. Even our own president went ahead and, made a mistake of trying to be so quick in saying congratulations to Museveni. Now, what we have to do, in as much as these guys might be friends, is to reach out and say what you've done is not okay. Because that is how we can be able to tell these guys that we're watching and we care. Because Uganda is our neighbor. If it descends to violence or something like that, we stand to lose, because Uganda is a market for most of the goods we produce here and even services. Our banks have expanded all the way to Uganda and even Tanzania. So anytime there is some kind of violence or chaos, we lose as a nation and as business people and as trade partners. So the president and other presidents from the rest of the continent need to always have a take in what happens, and they have to come out and rebuke when democracy is stifled or interfered with in our neighboring countries. But again, it comes back to equity. When you're doing funny things during electioneering processes in your own country, you always lack the moral high ground to go out and point an accusing finger at someone who's doing the same thing you're doing back home. That is why you can find someone like Magufuli most likely congratulating Museveni for what he did. That is why you can find someone like maybe Mnangagwa from Zimbabwe, the 78-year-old, doing the same. So we have to again look out for support, especially for young people who would like to see democratic progress in our countries. The unfortunate thing is, the outside world is not going to be available for us every single time. You realize when Trump was elected president, he focused on the United States, so we were left on our own. That actually, when the ambassador was appointed in Kenya, it's like he has not been present, because we are used to American ambassadors to Kenya always supporting citizens as they clamor for transparency, as they complain against corruption, but he has been so quiet. So it's not always the rest of the world will support us as we push for democracy. We have to do it ourselves.
But then, talking about the youth learning from those who are already there, transfer of power seems to be a problem, especially in Africa. The youth that are looking up to the old regime, won't they sort of embrace the practices that are being done right now, and it's a cycle that keeps on going on and on?
There comes a time when that cycle gets broken, and in as much as the progress is very slow, sometimes annoyingly slow, we are making progress. It's of course not something we're very proud of. So at some point the cycle gets broken. The backwardness of clinging to power, sticking to power for so long does not remain appealing for a long time. And because if you can look at places like Ghana and South Africa and even Kenya itself, we're making progress. People get tired. President Moi stuck in power for 24 years. He left. Kibaki came in. He was satisfied with 2 terms. He quit. He left when his time came to leave. And as you've heard, President Kenyatta say repeatedly, as soon as 2022 comes, he's going back home. So we are witnessing what we call an embrace of democratic principles. You don't have to extend term limits. Now, the unfortunate thing is, even as Kenya and other countries do that, we're witnessing the removal of term limits. Like in Uganda, it was removed in 2015. In Rwanda, it was removed, whereby now we have cases of guys who can actually be presidents for life. You become a president until you die. But that number of, that kind of behavior is facing a lot of pressure from the expanding democratic space. And with time, we're likely to see cases where, African countries can also be proud to say we're democratic. Once you're done with your 2 terms or 3 terms or 1 term, you pave way, for something else.
As we conclude the discussion, now opposition leader, of course, Uganda's opposition leader, Bobi Wine, is set to challenge the victory. What are the implications of this decision?
Well, I think that is a message he's trying to send to Museveni that it's not going to be easy. Obviously, the challenge won't lead to anything. He's just trying to send a message that it won't be easy. We're going to be watching what you're doing. And I think it's a way of rallying his troops and making them aware that he's not going to be just a young boy who's trying to, make noise against Museveni. I think at the back of his mind, he knows that the president for the next 5 or so years will be Museveni. But I wish him all the best. And if possible, the rest of the continent, the African leaders need to support not Museveni, but Bobi Wine for the sake of Ugandans.
All right, we will see how this pans out. Thank you very much, Onchari Oyeyo, who is the regional affairs commentator, for making time to join us here on Bottomline Africa. And finally, Chinonso Eche from Nigeria set a world record for the most consecutive soccer ball touches in 1 minute while balancing a second ball on his head. The 12-year-old, who has become an online sensation, says he's planning to take his skills global when he grows up. Take a look at Eche's showcase his football skills in our images of the day.
Nobody teach me, but my father made impact in my life by showing me some videos of Leo Messi, Ronaldinho, Okocha, and I picked up from there. My friends was cursing me, laughing at me, but when I break a record, my friends said they want to be like me. The Guinness World Record that I won, this is the letter that came with the Guinness World Record. This is my number, Action. This is the captive band that Kanu gave to me, Kanu. My dream is to become a footballer and international freestyler and travel all over the world.
Well, that's all we had for you here on Bottomline Africa. Thank you very much for making time to join us. I am Ashley Mazuri. Enjoy the rest of your day.